wanted to maybe do some other legislative concepts or start all over again with 1077. I think most of us wanted to just work with 1077. But I'd like to hear if anybody's kind of sat with those thoughts and has some stuff to add.
April, sorry to interrupt. Before we jump in, just from a rules perspective, we need to review and approve the agenda, make sure there are no additional items anyone would like to add before we get to the second agenda item, which is what you're talking about right now.
Yep. It's funny because I always skip the first part when I'm listening to meetings, so it makes sense why I would want to do that now. So let's approve the agenda. Would somebody like to make a motion?
So moved. Unless anyone has any additions.
I'll second.
No. Okay. All right, got a motion and a second. Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, approved. Okay, well, let's go back to the discussion about SB 1077 and legislative concepts. Shasta, I imagine you've got some things to add.
Well, I was just, I've been looking at the document that Todd put together after the last meeting. And so he had pulled out kind of 3 different concepts from 1077-1. And then there were several suggestions that I had, but I think the only one that might be actionable is at this point is, giving the PRA the same powers to inspect records that DAs and AGs have in the appeals process in order to facilitate resolutions. So I guess I would propose that the council discuss kind of those 4 options, and I don't know, maybe Todd can put the document in the chat so we all know what we're talking about.
Sure, I'll drop the link.
Shasta, I just want to say I appreciate you putting those thoughts together. I found myself agreeing with the comments and of the suggested actions. I concur. There's a lot of really good ideas in those bullet points down there, and some will take time, as you noted in there. Worth keeping on the radar, I think, and I like the idea of working with 1077, especially the 3 bullets called out at the top, and then the one you flagged just now about giving the PRA those authorities. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I did, one of the things that we talked about a lot in the last meeting was making sure that this had kind of community buy-in so that we don't get blindsided by opposition. So I did kind of circulate these around to folks and make sure, that there wasn't any kind of major upset, and there wasn't. I did have a suggestion on that first one of the fee amount, that you have a, I can't, that the agency can't charge for the creating the basis for the fee. Do we think that's something that we could add in there?
I would have some concerns about that. I think based on past experience with these legislative concepts, anything that would change the current fee scheme or require public bodies to do any kind of work that's currently acceptable but now says they can't charge, I think is going to be met with heavy opposition, simply because the way Oregon system is structured is that even that type of initial review and preparation work has and is and always has been permitted. And as state and local governments are struggling to make up for shortfalls in their budget, I think, to be realistic, just anything that would allow anyone to say this will take away revenue or otherwise require them to use money they don't have, I think it's going to be met with a lot of opposition. And I know that's an issue every legislative session, and it's something we're always up against, but I just think in reality, we don't have enough, I don't know what's the word, like impetus behind us to convince others that that loss of potential income is more important than status quo. And I just think we're going to get people to come out of the woodwork saying that. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think there are, if you compare it to the federal system or even Washington State and elsewhere, they already do that. And but it's never been the case here. And I think to try to make that change now is a non-starter.
I hear that. Do you have any idea what the fee structure would be for creating the basis of a fee? I mean, it just seems like if you're already giving somebody a fee, then you already created the basis for the fee. Like you already did that work.
Wait, oh, I'm sorry, Shasta.
Oh.
I completely misunderstood what you said. You're saying that they can't charge for the time it takes to explain the fee estimate related to this concept? Okay, I completely misread what you said as saying that an additional thing we should add is that public bodies can charge for the preparation of like a public records request. Okay, I completely went way too far afield. You
So
know,
what
I
we're
would be
talking
able-
about, I'm sorry, I
Go-
just want to make sure
no, go
I'm
ahead.
following correctly. What we're talking about is this first bullet point on the 1077 thing that you've pulled out where the public body should be able to provide the basis for a fee. Is that what we're talking about?
Like the reasonable explanation.
Yep.
Yeah, they could effectively already charge for creating a fee estimate, presumably, which this would not touch. I'd be open to including that if then they were required to do this next step of then explaining the fee estimate in a reasonable fashion, that should not be included like in the determination of actual cost. I think
I
that-
don't know, however you want to put that into legalese to put it in there, but
Well,
yeah, I
that's
mean,
why I said it the
basically,
way,
like,
because
we
I
don't
think
want
it
to
would be
create another step and another barrier where they're going to be like, okay, sure, but it'll be money to tell you why it's money.
right. No, so that's why I said shouldn't be included in the calculation of actual costs, because I think that would align with like sort of current language, and it
Great.
wouldn't require like too much heavy lifting added if approved.
Okay.
Scott, I'm
So,
curious from the
Todd-
city's perspective. Oh, sorry, I was just
I
maybe that's not for
just
me
want
to.
to make sure I'm following. Like, you're saying that they should not charge a fee for trying to for providing the basis of the fee. Is that right? Okay. All right. Good.
I wholly support that. I was just listening to the conversation. You've charged a fee to explain why you need to charge a fee. I guarantee you, and we all can, think of situations in our minds where that is probably happening. I don't know that personally in Oregon, it's at the city level. But I agree. You don't charge a fee to explain why you need to charge a fee. That seems kind of ridiculous. So I support putting into the law that you can't charge for that. I don't think many cities would have heartburn over that.
Yeah,
That's just part of responding to records requests, basically.
yeah, I would agree. It's already a best practice to try to answer questions about your fees, so
Yep.
you have a better relationship, right? And also, I've never, to this date, for public bodies that do engage in that conversation, I've never seen a single one trying to charge to offer that explanation. So hopefully, they won't feel like putting that into the law would be something worth objecting to.
Okay, great. Can we move on to bullet point 2?
Yes.
So for this one, oops.
Oops, I have a question, sorry, and I hit the thumbs.
Mhm.
So on the bullet point 1, just to flag, this is Andy, I work for Rep. Anderson. So Rep. Anderson may be with us, I'm not sure, he was gonna try today. But there was a timing element in what we were just talking about. I think it says 5 days in the draft. My first thought is that's too tight. But I mean, it doesn't matter. You have a bill that public could say that's 5 days. Sometimes that's hard for a government to respond in 5, even with an explanation. That just seems a little tight, but that was my first reaction. But that can all be tailored in the legislative process, but that's my first reaction.
Could I follow up on that? 'Cause I have some thoughts from when we drafted that portion. Which was, if a public body's already created a fee estimate and sent it without explanation, they should already know why they're charging those fees. And so the only time they would have to respond with more details if a requester asked, and 5 business days didn't seem like a heavy lift because they should already know that information internally. It was just a matter of getting it to a requester within a reasonable time. But I also hear what you're saying about legislature could do it at once with that time frame too.
Sure. No, and that I understand what you're saying, Todd. It would just be, let's say the supervisor's literally, the person that does it is gone. I mean, in government, pretty small. That's quite common that person, and I know there are other requirements around public records that may be that's not a factor in response times, but for this particular one, maybe it's, I don't know what's right, but it just seems, I did work in the county world for a long time. Some county jurisdictions just don't have staff to do all kinds of stuff. And I know public records are kind of different and response times are set in statute. But this particular wrinkle, it just seems, you know, for a small jurisdiction, it might be a little bit problematic. That's all.
I'm
I like,
comfortable. Go ahead.
sorry, Casta. I like the 5 day because it keeps in line with the other 5 days to acknowledge. I think that there's sort of a nice consistency there. And I think maybe we add language that says 5 days to have an explanation, or it kind of like on a record, the regular records request process, provide the information or explain. Maybe we could add language that explain, like, basically provide an update. If for those cases where you have the one records person's out of the office until, you know, for whatever, maybe it's 5 days to provide an explanation of the fee or provide an update when an explanation will be provided. I don't know if that makes it too vague, but I personally kind of like the 5 day turnaround, because I think in a practical sense, there will be a handful, if this is implemented, there'll be a handful of reasons to justify a fee, and cities will get used to having those certain bullet points ready to cut and paste into a response. So it really shouldn't be too hard. Like Todd said, by the time they're providing that, they should already know what their reasoning is. So I kind of like the 5 day, but we may want to give it a little more vagueness to give it more time.
Well, also, I think they're going to be incentivized to answer within 5 business days because the clock to collect payment actually stops until they do. So that could get them on board. And look, let's be real, there's no cause of action if they fail to respond within 5 business days. Like, it can't be appealed. It doesn't impact the public body other than that they can't get the money. And so I think for those few who can't comply or won't comply, it's going to become, as you know, within 5 business days or as soon as practicable. And then if we find that to be a true problem, we as a legislative concept drafting body may want to revisit this section and come up with additional language about either changing the timeline or some other, I guess, stick for not complying within that time period. But right now the stick is they can't collect the money till they do.
I think including this in the law will also incentivize public bodies to ensure that they have somebody as backup when the one public records person goes on vacation. It seems like that should be something they prepare for.
In an ideal world, yeah.
Andrew, did you have your hand up again?
Not on purpose, but you guys have all convinced me. So whatever, I liked 2 things that I would just say, would defer to that it would kind of conform to the other timelines, number 1, and what you said is reasonable. And then I guess I didn't understand that payment is linked to this, I guess. So it is incentivized, and whatever you put in there, somebody's going to say it's too short. I'm just trying to play the perspective of a jurisdiction. Pretty quickly, we'll just say that's too quick. Whatever you pick, they're probably going to say it's too quick. So, I mean, what do we change it to? 5.5 days? It doesn't count weekends. I mean, and so I don't think you necessarily need to go there. I just know that for local government, these are significant resource, more than you think. They're sensitive to this issue. So I'm just trying to preempt that a little bit, but I think what Scott said and what others have said makes total sense.
Any other thoughts on this second bullet point?
Oh, are we on to the second one now?
Oh, I thought we were. Isn't that where we
No,
are? Or
I
no,
think-
we're still on the basis. Okay, we're not
Yep.
moving on. Are we done with the first bullet point?
I think so.
Okay, let's move on to the second one. So
So
okay, go ahead,
this-
Shasta.
Well, I mean, Todd can explain it better than me, but this one seems to, if there's a denial of a request for a fee waiver or a fee reduction, then the custodian provides an explanation of the denial. So this is kind of the same thing. So a colleague was interested in adding with its specific rationale to that language. So not just a written explanation, but like specifically why. So just kind of like adding more detail there and to make sure that there's like actual communication instead of kind of a form letter. Oh, you're muted,
I'm
Doug.
talking into the muted microphone. This concept was largely drafted by a bunch of lawyers. And so what I had in my head was the standard already is public bodies have discretion to deny fee waivers in the public interest, but they have to do so in good faith. And it's basically a balancing act between the two public interests of disclosure over confidentiality that time versus like appropriate use of government resources. So they're only supposed to be denying it in the first place for that reason, like effectively in good faith. So I think we already had that standard in mind when we said, and you got to put that in writing to the requester. But I don't have any problem sort of, including that other language here to make sure it's clear that a written denial in fact means that you've already like established a good faith basis for doing so. If we're essentially just kind of restating the requirement here, I think we can make that work.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I don't have any thoughts to add. I'm fine with this the second bullet point.
Hey, April, I
Yes.
see we have a hand raised, and I think it's a member of the audience. Do we want to remind folks that we'll take comment at the end?
Yeah. I'm not familiar with everybody who's actually on the committee, so I appreciate you highlighting that. We have a public commentary section of this meeting after the discussion. So once we're done with this part of the agenda, which is discussing the legislative concepts, we'll move on to the public comment section of the meeting.
And just before we leave this concept, do we want me to offer alternative writing where it restates the existing standard, or are we okay with believing that this language would then connect to the existing standard of denying a public interest fee waiver or reduction?
I guess I would be interested in seeing, if it's not with its specific rationale, like literally poked in there, if it's saying in accordance with, this reference of whatever you're talking about, then I think that would be sufficient.
Okay. Do we need a vote, or is everyone just pretty okay with that? I mean, there's 4 of us here. I'm okay with that, offering some language. Yeah. Okay, I will do that and get it to you guys as soon as possible.
So on the third point, I think it's kind of funny because like, are there public bodies that don't have websites? I mean, maybe they should have
Yes.
one. It seems
Yes.
like accessibility wise, they should
think
have a website.
The example
Some public bodies don't
Yeah.
have websites, or if they do, they don't have public records pages, or if they do, their pages don't include their policies. And that includes some very large public bodies in Oregon at the state and local level. And even if they do include their policy, it doesn't always include their fee scheme.
I think this is where Mark would say that of the 900 special districts in Oregon, there are some ones out there that rely on other agencies to kind of host their work, and they don't have their own standalone. So,
Right. But
Yeah.
the
That
good
makes
news about
sense.
this is all this does is take an existing requirement and give it consequences, because this is the requirement to post your policy, including how you charge fees and who your records custodian or contact person is, has been part of the law for I don't know how long, but a very long time. The only difference is it's never had teeth. So this just says, do what you're supposed to have been doing all the time, and if not, you can't charge. And that's why I don't know if this is really appropriate now, but I would say I'm not in favor of an E clause that says the bill goes into effect immediately upon passage, simply because I think public bodies will need a little time to run up their processes for adding these concepts if it passes. Ultimately, that's not really up to us, but if there's an option for us to weigh in on that, I'd be in favor of, at least a several month period, if not a year, before these go into effect.
I agree all the way around.
Me too.
And for the next, are we ready to move on? For the next section, this is not pertaining to 1077. These are just kind of new ideas that we can discuss. Is that right?
Yeah, so this was just kind of like my brainstorming around the results from the survey. When I kind of looked more critically at them, I was like, I don't think any of these are ready for 2027. I don't think that these are things that we can propose right this second. But I do think it's something that we as a council and as a subcommittee should be looking at. Um, I'm hoping to invite somebody from the IT systems to come and talk to us about what kind of technology solutions they're working on and what potential solutions there are for a lot of the tech problems that we identified in our survey. And then as far as like a grant opportunity or, some sort of emergency collaboration, if there's like a spike of interest in a certain agency, I think that would be a really good thing for Oregonians. But again, I don't think it's something that we're ready to like roll out, but something that might be worth scheduling some conversations about. And then the other one is just, the drumbeat over and over in responses from the survey is simplify the law, simplify the law. So, in whatever we're doing, like, let's make sure not to make it more complicated.
Yeah, and I don't think that's just for the agencies. Like, this is supposed to be a public service. It needs to be legible and understandable by the general public. Like, people shouldn't read this and have their eyes glaze over and be extra confused. So I think that would be really great. You wrote like a note here. Where is the state attorney? Is that something that like who would handle like simplifying it? And is that like a skill set
Sunshine
they
Committee.
have?
Well, I
Okay.
was just noting that the Sunshine Committee is charged with doing that because they're supposed to be getting rid of some of the 550 exceptions, but I have yet to connect with them, so I don't know where they're at in their work. But yeah, I mean, I think that all of us in this space can contribute to trying to make the law more simple.
April, I think you were referring to the red text on the document. I think
Yes.
those are comments from Joe
Oh, I didn't
Baker
see
and
those.
Parker. Joe Parker.
Oh, I thought those were comments from you, Shasta. I was like, who's the state? Yeah. Anyway, cool.
Maybe she can tell us, or they. Um, And then at our last meeting, Nick spoke up from the audience to say this, that we could expand the PRA's capacity to look at records during a dispute. I think that's a good idea.
I
And
do
don't
too,
think
and I'm curious if what Todd's thoughts on that one are.
I honestly don't think it's necessary right now or doesn't really connect to our current authority simply because we don't have the power to compel really outside of the formal dispute resolution process for state agencies in the executive branch. I have no authority to compel anyone to work with our office. So including any sort of requirement that a public body like must give me access to their records would go against the nature of our office. And it was only, I think, frankly, because of a watered down version of our office was proposed that we got local support to create the office in the first place. So unless or until we're going to expand the duties of the office, like, yeah, we like public bodies have to enter into mediation with us, or we take over the AG's uh, appellate process or something like that, or create an alternative system where we have more to do and others have to work with us. I don't think we gain anything by requiring them to like give us access to their records. And I will say there is a process for submitting documentation to us for the formal dispute resolution process, at which point I could deem it confidential or not. So there is a way to handle records that we get then. I will say, even when appealing to the AG or the DA, it's up to the public body to submit as much or as little information as they want. And that appellate statute actually says when necessary, they could just provide details about their records or otherwise summarize that information to the AG or DA. And I think that's because there are certain times when a public body cannot release confidential information under any circumstances. And so even there, if they choose to engage less with the AG or DA, the DA and AG still just has to go forward and make their decision with the information they have, which could not work out for the public body. So Like really, there's no reason to create parity at this point or even exceed what's required of the appellate process now. I think it definitely is useful in a conversation about expanding our office's authority. Like for instance, is it Massachusetts or Connecticut? No, Connecticut's Freedom of Information office, I'm forgetting their official name. They have two branches. One side is like they started like us with one person and then two giving out advice. They now have an adjudicatory side that is firewalled from the advice side, and it would make sense if we created a like a similar process to then have like requirements about sharing information, so on and so forth. But I think our statute as it exists works fine because I tell public bodies they don't have to talk to me, but I would like them to because I want to help. And they do provide me with information sort of as needed or as much as they're willing to. I don't know. I don't see a need. Plus, I just don't know how it would connect to, like, if we're like, oh, we can't make you do anything, but you have to give us this information. And I don't really see how that connects to our current work. But I like the idea of discussing us doing more, having additional authority down the road, and then creating sort of information submission requirements to go along with it.
So in your experience, like 100% of agencies are like, yeah, totally, we'll work with you, and here's why, and it seems reasonable.
It's very rare for a public body not to respond to me at all or not to provide any information. Early on, I had a couple of public bodies say, how do I know you're even real and or you're a real government agency? And I would send them our website and say, because I am. And then sometimes they would talk, but sometimes they won't. Some public bodies are very tight-lipped and just will say like, yeah, we think we did it right, and like don't want to participate. But most talk to us and at least provide explanations about why they're doing what they're doing. And certainly those that reach out to us themselves for help are rather expansive and provide a lot of information. But the truth is also a lot of these requests, like if a request involves someone who asks for any and all emails between so and so over X amount of time and there's like 10,000 results, the issue really isn't me parsing those emails to figure out what isn't or what is or isn't responsive or what isn't or is confidential. It's more about like, is this an appropriate search? Are you charging the right amount of fees? Is a requester willing to pay that amount? What's an effective way to review them for exemptions and then charge accordingly? So it's rare for me to have to look at the records themselves. And a lot of times public bodies are willing to share enough information with me to know what I need to know anyway when offering advice. So this hasn't arisen as an issue for me yet. I think I get where Nick's coming from because I think he'd like us to be able to do more. But adding this provision to our statute on its own won't get us anywhere. Adding this would have to come with other things being added for us to do more effectively.
Can you hear that?
And for the PRAC itself, we already have language in the statute that says public bodies are required to work with the council to the extent like, confidentiality laws permit. So maybe even something like that for our office, if we expand our abilities down the road, would be enough.
Andrew?
Could I go back to, so this isn't on the policy side of public. So Shasta, the three of your first bullets to me, I mean, the first kind of way for me to think of this, they don't seem to be policy oriented. It was about a grant, it was about flexibility and capacity, and then the third one was about IT, right? So when you said they're not ready, what I thought in my head, being staff, is those ideas are plenty ready to get going in the legislative process, because otherwise you're going to wait another 2 years. So if you wanted to try to at least get the legislature to think about those issues,
Yeah,
they could be.
You're the expert. Let's do it.
Well, we're not experts. We're the elected people who get to represent my bosses. So, but no, the more you wait, the more it doesn't happen. So, I mean, you can put in a bill that has a placeholder, potential IT discuss. I mean, your bill doesn't have to be perfect. It can flag things that are essentially become an informational hearing. They aren't ready for a bill, but the bill will ripen or not ripen on its own. So I would just encourage you, and my boss does this quite a bit. The bill does, in some instances on policy, you want to cook the bill. But if it's not policy, don't wait to cook it. Just give it to us. Give it, it could be our boss, could be the agency, run a bill and get the work going, because it always takes longer than you think. So that would be my thought.
Okay, then let's talk about that. What do we think about forwarding on, a policy on or grant opportunities for agencies to hire and train public records coordinators.
My recommendation would be that would be a separate legislative concept from the 3 communication requirements that are more fully cooked. Because I'm just really concerned about anyone getting ahead of us and trying to object to what are obviously grand ideas that need time to be developed, but could ultimately result in some really good outcomes. So I just think it's important to separate them. Other than that, I mean, why not get the legislature talking, even if they do no more than create an exploratory committee that some of us join and start building out concepts from? Could be great.
Do you
And
foresee?
so I don't want to contaminate your ideas that are practical and you want to go. I mean, I think the idea, Todd, of 2 bills or the money component, because you have money in your bill, that always sends it a weird way. So yeah, the notion that you wouldn't necessarily pack it all in one bill, but the notion that you would bring ideas forward, again, sometimes things get traction sooner than you think, or there's, most of it depends on resource, guys. So it's probably not the great session what's coming up at all for that, but nonetheless, there's a little bit of a downside that somebody has to kind of articulate these things. Somebody has to be ready to help educate the committee. But isn't that part of the work we're supposed to do? I mean, this committee, at least on the issues.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it does kind of go together with number 2, but all 3 of those could be bills that are separate. But I think April, I can't remember the word you used, but like an emergency management memorandum of understanding or something, like some sort
Yeah,
of.
it's a mutual aid
Yeah.
is kind of what like fire agencies do, but also emergency managers do it, where if
Mhm.
there's a disaster in a certain area, emergency managers from other parts of the state who work for different counties will come and help them. And we could, potentially talk to them about how that works, because I imagine it's a little complicated because they're going from one county to another county that has totally different systems, but they seem to have figured it out. So I think it's totally possible for a public records person to be able to do that too.
So Andy and Scott, like you guys have worked in those kind of systems. Like if Oregon City needed help all of a sudden, could you guys go over there and help them with their systems?
I'm limited fashion. I think it's definitely a creative space to explore. I like comparing it to the mutual fire aid agreements, and we network with each other. We have a professional state association of recorders that very much do this sort of work in terms of supporting each other. And the actual concept of going to another city and getting into the weeds of working with them would be new, but I think it'd be a great space to explore to see where that discussion goes. I kind of get the sense that we're maybe looking at 2 legislative batches. There's the communications bill, right? And then from at 1077, then there's like mutual aid and also like shared funding support, that maybe all 3 of those first 3 bullets Shasta proposed could be a bill together, or however the experts in the legislature want to package them. But I'm liking the concept of those 2 pieces, those 2 groups.
Yep.
Cameron?
I think the biggest problem you would have with a kind of mutual aid agreement is that you have confidentiality, you have attorney-client privilege, you have other things that would not transfer to that new employee. So you would waive all your confidentiality. You would have maybe statutes violated for sharing stuff outside the office by bringing someone in that wasn't part of that office. So you would have to have it strongly written so that any confidentiality, privilege, or anything, you would have to treat them as an employee of that public body that they came into in order for that to really work. And so that, I mean, it is doable, but it would be very complicated, like Scott said. It's not like going out and helping fight a fire or something. This is a different stuff when you're sharing confidential information.
It's good to know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know I've seen that happen before between state agencies, but I would assume it's a more long-term thing. Like when DEQ had their data breach, they had somebody from ODOT for like a year or 2 who helped them with the public relations part of it. So I think that's probably why they assumed that person as an employee, because then they had some confidentiality at that point.
Yeah, that's why I like the idea of putting these all together in one legislative concept, so we could propose a suite of solutions that if any and all are approved, it becomes a toolbox that public bodies could choose to draw on at their discretion. And certainly they within themselves would have to then address things like confidentiality and indemnification and everything else. And that we wouldn't even necessarily have to get into the weeds on that, because that would be up to them to work out amongst existing agreements. Although perhaps a further step of our office, if this were to become law, is that we could start creating some template agreements, well researched, to help public bodies get started on creating these, so it's not so scary right out of the gate. Not least of which because a lot of local public bodies are small and actually use contract attorneys as their, like, city or county or special district attorney. They'd want to work with them, but if we could get them started, we could probably save them some time and money and make it more palatable to do it.
Is that something that, like, I'm just imagining that, like, this happens, that a public body gets kind of swamped with requests. I know it happened when Portland Public Schools got that lead and water scandal. And would they, like, then be able to come to you as a public records advocate and be like, and then you go, you know what? I have this toolkit and here you go.
I mean, honestly, I'm not trying to take this on without more staff, but I would be a resource to explain it. I would create specific trainings around it. I wouldn't run it. It would just be the law that permits them to do it. And
Right.
we would do our best to offer best practices, templates, et cetera, and assist them in that way. But yeah, definitely not administer it. And like, for instance, if the state's going to start offering grants, unless they want to give me a new staff member to administer those grants and like make sure the money's taken care of and everything else, we can't run it, but we could sure as hell help with it and explain it and, anything else that's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's definitely not exactly the same concept, but there is, Todd, as you might be familiar with, there's the Oregon Records Management Solution, which is an IGA that is state archives and a private consulting firm called Chavs Consulting, and then a number of local cities, Milwaukee being one of them, and school districts and state agencies, where we sign on to a shared electronic records management storage system. And I would think that somewhere in that language of that IGA there addresses what Cameron mentioned in terms of confidentiality and accessing other agencies' records. I know that's not exactly the same concept of mutual aid we're talking about, but I got to think or wonder if there's something in that arrangement where it's the state, bunch of local school districts and cities and a private consultant working in a shared records space.
It probably does offer useful guidance and language. And, when we bring this, maybe if we're going to continue drafting this concept in the subcommittee, Stephanie's not a part of it, but of course she oversees ORMS for state archives. So we can maybe get her to come as a guest and talk to us about some of that to better understand how they make it work. Coincidentally, our office is in the process of signing up for ORMS to archive all prior council meetings.
Right.
So I'll be getting that assistance from archives too soon enough.
So I'm just trying to think about how this could help agencies when they are getting inundated during an event like the lead in the water thing. And I guess guidance, I think, is really helpful, but I'm sure what they really need is capacity. And I think what might help with that is something like what the governor's office does, where they post all of the public records requests they've had and the responses to those requests. Because I think in times of high volume, they're probably getting a lot of the same requests. And what could cut down on that workload is just sharing what they've already shared with others. I don't know, just thinking about in terms of helping with capacity.
That might be a part of it. We lean into the thought process behind the first bullet, grant opportunities, and basically how do you get more funding dedicated for records to respond to those type of situations.
There is a timeliness factor to all this though. So let's say like all our concepts succeed and there's now a pool of state money they can draw from and or a pool of potential employees that could be, you know, seconded from other state agencies or local governments to assist with public records requests. Public bodies still have deadlines to respond to individual public records requests. And I don't know how quickly we, you know, the state especially, or any government, can create a responsive process that would allow them to get help on a particularly onerous public records request in the time required by statute.
Well,
So,
the
yeah.
release valve on that is that, I can't remember what the exact wording is, but
The
that,
safety valve provision.
yeah, it's like that you can't do it because you don't have enough staff. So this solves that problem.
I mean, maybe, you know, certainly OHSU got dinged by the Court of Appeals and in Defense of Animals versus OHSU for not hiring additional part-time staff to process that very large public records request that led to the lawsuit. So, I mean, it's certainly something that's been thought of. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. And maybe that would become a factor in deciding if a public body responded in a timely fashion or not. Staff wasn't available, but they applied to that process or program and had to wait for an answer. Might become a reason why it's acceptable to delay a response to a public records request. I don't know.
Okay. So to summarize what we're looking at here and what we've talked about, I mean, Shasta, could you help me out here? Are we talking about two
Yeah,
different
so
bills?
yeah, well, I mean, so the third one is around IT solutions, and I mean, frankly, I just don't know enough about IT to know what the solutions would be. But I know that in the survey, people were asking for, more centralized tracking, shared, software licensing, redaction systems, digital storage. And I also think that AI is going to be huge, and we need to start utilizing those tools where appropriate. So yeah, I mean, to me, it's kind of like a big question mark, but something that I'm definitely interested in pursuing and would love to get, more knowledgeable people than me in the conversation about it. So maybe folks on this room can help me out. So the state CIO is Terrence Woods, is that right? At the
Yes.
Enterprise or something?
Yeah.
Because I reached out to them last week and I haven't heard back at all. So I don't know how to get a hold of them, but it would be really good to get an update from techie type people on what's going on already in the state as far as records processing and transparency, because I'm sure that we're not the only people thinking about this. But for now, I mean, I feel like, just kind of proposing, sort of I like the way Todd put it, like, here's a toolkit, here's a solutions focused bill that's separate from the communication stuff that's already been vetted. But this is kind of our new vehicle, our new concept to kind of discussing, the next wave of solutions.
Maybe a way forward is, well, on the 3 communication requirements, I'm going to propose specific language about adding the rationale for denying public interest fee waiver or reduction. And then we could, as a subcommittee, vote on those like, okay, we feel like those are ready to go. We're going to hold on to those, put them aside, and then we could start drafting our concepts that don't have to be fully developed, but understood by us for the second legislative concept. And we could invite testimony and so on and so forth as we work forward on those.
Yeah, that sounds great.
As a part of that process too, I was going to ask, I know we've talked about the Sunshine Committee before, and I agree with your remark there, Shasta, about opportunity to work, that's the Sunshine Committee working also to make things simpler. Is this an opportunity to make a connection with them? I know we've talked about that, and there's been, I don't know if it's historical, just to this point, we haven't, the PRAC and the Sunshine Committee haven't really connected as far as I know, but is this an opportunity to try to start a conversation with that group?
Yeah, I intended a few months ago to go to one of their meetings, and I never ended up being able to, but I'll look up again when they meet. I know Mark Landauer is on both PRAC and Sunshine Committee, and we were hoping that he would give us an update at the next in-person council meeting.
Right. Friday.
Yeah. Coming right up. Yeah, so I think that sounds good. So, Todd, so you'll send back, and will you also do the language on around actual costs, that this fee estimate or explanation thing wouldn't be included in actual cost, or however you want to put that?
Yes. I'll update that too with some language.
Hi, Andy. Thank you so much for your encouragement.
All right. Are we done with the discussion over legislative concepts?
Well, I just want to make sure I understand our path forward. So at the next, before the next meeting, I'll provide updated language. And then I suppose we'll start. Well, my suggestion is, like I said, and I think it's pretty obvious, we'll then finalize the communication requirements, recommendations, and then continue working on the second legislative concept, which is potentially all three of Shas's ideas in one. So do we have any, April, do we have any marching orders, duties, or mandates to make that happen for the next meeting? Like, do we want to try to invite people or do anything else by the next meeting, or do we want to just start talking about this more in the next meeting?
Not entirely sure. So we got you providing some updated language. I don't know, Shasta, what do you think?
So you're gonna send the subcommittee out like the written, like edited version of those three concepts as one thing. And then us
Oh,
as
me?
yeah, you,
Oh,
right?
sorry. No, because
No.
I mean, there's not much more to say at this point than what you've already put in there.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. So I really don't think I have anything to do more on that at the moment, but I think we need to continue developing that, and maybe Andy can help us in terms of like how vague or how specific. Because I mean, it could be something as simple as the legislature legislature shall direct whatever subcommittee or whatever to study blah. And that could start the discussion. So I don't know. I think we need a little guidance on what form we want these concepts to take, and therefore that'll dictate what we need to do to get there.
Oh, okay.
But I think, did he
I mean,
leave?
I was just thinking like, so as a subcommittee, I don't think we're ready to vote on those three communication concepts yet because we don't have the
Agreed.
final language. But
Yeah,
once we vote
agreed.
on it, it will go to the full council, and then the full council will send it to the legislator, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the full council
Yeah.
debate and vote and may change it further. But do we want to do that piecemeal? Because we'll almost likely get the three communication recommendations ready first. So we
Yeah.
could send that to the full council, and so we could work on that while we continue to work on the other stuff.
Yeah, I think that we should, first get the communications ones out of this subcommittee. But I think we need another meeting so that we can vote on the final language to forward to the council. So that would be one agenda item, and then the next one would be our kind of
Continuing
next
to develop.
box of, legislative
Okay.
concepts.
Yeah, so finalize and vote on communication recommendations, and then continue drafting, let's call it the toolkit concept.
Let's call
Okay.
it that.
Okay. And then we could come back to this at the end when we're discussing topics for the next meeting, but that makes sense to me as next steps. So thank you.
Did we haven't already scheduled another subcommittee meeting, right? Is that something we should discuss now? Or
Yeah,
vote in a doodle poll?
I think that's like our last agenda item.
Okay, cool. Then I will hold off on that. Anything else on legislative concepts?
Nope.
Okay, moving on to public comment. Hi, Joe. Go ahead and go, Joe, and introduce yourself and all that. Todd, do you have the ability to unmute Joe?
I believe so. I'm going to give it a try.
I think I did it.
Oh yeah,
I did it.
very good.
Thank you. I had the previous notes of Control Shift M. Thank you. Sorry, I get ready to talk and I get a frog in my throat. Todd, I want to thank you so much for passing out my grossly misspelled comments. And thank you, April, for raising the state attorney general issue. I do have a concern with the 5-day notification. Well, 2 points. One, being a formal council person and subject to recall, the 5-day provision for getting back to a public records response on that is the dead end deal. I mean, it's short, sweet, straight to the point. And I actually think that there should be an exception or exemption to public recall ballots when it comes to public records requests, because you know, as a recall council person, you have the right to know what someone is saying about you, and you have the right to respond. Well, if they wait till the 5th day, and your 5th day, your comment has to be up with the Secretary of State, you're already behind the 8 ball. Addressing Andrew's issue and still playing nice with Scott on the 5-day provision, Andrew made a really interesting point of should we exclude weekends, and a simple word of business, 5 business days, that makes it clear in most issues. When it comes to the 2 bullet points under the SB, point 3 actually covers all of them, because if a government body has a website or an inability to have a website, they have to disclose how they come up with their fee structure, what is covered, the time frame, the whole 9 yards. So that, to me, bullet 3 should actually be the guiding light of the fee structure, this and that, because that's supposed to be included within the disclosure of how public records are made, fee cost, this and that. Instead of being caught blindsided, with, oh, well, we're adding, 50% salary because this person reviewed, then you're paying 100% salary of this. And when I say salary, I mean hourly wage. You're paying 100% of this person, then you're paying an extra 25 to 50 cents per page, anything over $10, blah, 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 blah. Some agencies that I have heard make comments state that anything under 10 pages is gratis. That does cut into the financial bottom line under Todd's concept, but it would appear fair for the larger inundative records requests for emergencies, such as the lead, fire, whatever. Then the last comment, Shasta, I like your ideas with the grant opportunities, because I can see both sides. One for how it's to be created and how it's to be funded. I also see Todd's point of who's actually going to be involved in this. And if we have a floater where someone from PRAC has to go to a hotspot, they need bodies themselves, because PRAC itself, the advocates are actually the designated go-to person. They're pretty much vested with privacy, confidentiality issues, at least in my mind. I could be completely wrong. But that's an ideological thought in my world. So I would actually change the word agency to government body. That way it covers everybody without saying, well, you got agencies and departments, and those two things mean different concepts depending on where you're at in the government structure. The executive branch has departments. Agencies, they're both state and federal, depending on which arena you're coming from, but that's just me. Shared software, that gets into some real sticky issues with connectivity and linking, and we're no strangers to data breaches, whether it's Experian, our banking institutions, our go-to service providers like, well, Walmart, Target, I'm just throwing companies out now without pointing fingers. I think just a basic high-level security requirement, double firewalls, without actually infringing on the sovereignty of the governing body on what they deem as high security risk issues. Naturally, of course, access to the financial government, financial budget, that is definitely that needs to be put in a sealed vault in my mind. But yeah, the state attorney general issue, that's basically in concept. So there's like 3 separate parts within the public records request where at one point, at least 50 to 75% of these meld as to what portion of this entity's records are not to be released. Health inspectors, you're not allowed to give out their badges. You're not allowed to give out investigative issues, blah, 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 who their clients are. But, those span across all 3. And I think if those were mind melded together for simplicity, it might help. But I'm sure the state attorney general has reasons why they shouldn't be. So thank you for letting me babble. Oh, one other thing, the last bullet on the appeals process. I can see 2 arenas here. I can see the administrative appeal process, that's just basically among PRAC local agencies, I should say governing bodies. And then there is also the litigation side. That creates a whole completely different issue with respects to confidentiality, lawyers negotiating amongst lawyers, what's being presented. It also creates a liability indemnity issue with PRAC if one of their employees is called to testify or be an expert witness. So I think I do like the concept that you raised, Todd, with Connecticut. I really do like that concept. That sounds something to really look forward to. But yeah, I'm not sure if.
Thank you, Joe. I don't mean to interrupt, but we have a couple other folks who want to give comments and.
No, I understand that, and I do thank you for allowing the time.
Great, thank you. Mindy?
Good afternoon. I apologize, I stepped here in the middle. But there were 3 topics that I felt like we could relate to here at Oregon Water Resources Department. I'm a former public records coordinator here, and I'm currently in a limited duration role as supervisor, supervising the public records coordinator. So our agency just got a dedicated public records coordinator position within the last 2 years, and we can relate to the struggle of getting inundated with requests, and especially the thousands of emails. We recently got a request that came back around 40,000 emails because it couldn't be narrowed. And so the third point I wanted to to say that we can relate to is we sometimes have to use that release valve, as you called it, that we just don't have enough staffing. So I'm glad I was here today to hear that the precedent from OHSU, Todd, that you mentioned. Thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you. Next, we have Alex. Could you introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Alex Downing. I'm the city recorder at the city of Cornwallis, and I know a couple of you on this call, so hello. I serve as the records manager for our jurisdiction, and I just had some comments I wanted to share specifically relating to your discussion of Shasta's proposed legislative concepts. I think the IT solution that you've been discussing, what I understand to be sort of like a public-private partnership for software that would help agencies with submitting, tracking, and fulfilling records requests, similar to like GovQA or Next Request or one of those solutions. I just wanted to speak in strong support of that legislative concept. I think it is really, it's like a win-win idea for both requesters and agencies. I see this as being something that would be really widely supported. And I think it's the most direct and high impact solution to the responses that you collected in your recent survey. And I also think that there's a model for it with the ORMS product for records management. So I think it kind of provides that same support to the public and agencies, but on the disclosure side. And then I also think it especially supports smaller jurisdictions with limited budgets and resources, which I think comes up a lot as that's an issue that this group and others are trying to solve. And then I saw in the chat, I think Leela had commented that Oregon has an enterprise contract with GovQA, which I didn't know about. Might be something worth exploring. I do know in my own experience and information from colleagues that that software is cost prohibitive for a lot of jurisdictions. So focusing on a solution that would have some cost savings there, I think is a good idea. So just wanted to, again, love this idea. I think there's a lot of people across the state that would be willing to work on it and partner on that concept. And then the other ideas that were brought up, the mutual aid idea, I do think it's interesting to think about. Practically, I have a hard time envisioning how that would work. Like that just at a local government level, we're a town of 60,000. If we got inundated with requests trying to onboard somebody who doesn't understand our system, and a lot of the systems aren't super well organized or intuitive, so it would be hard to have somebody who could be really helpful in that moment. So that one I do have some questions on, but I do think that grant opportunities concept is a good one to explore as well, especially funding for training for people, because I know that's always a need and a want. So thanks for the time and for the discussion.
Right, any other public comments? All right, going to close that part of the meeting, and now we will talk about when we will meet next. So do we want to meet in like 2 weeks?
Yeah. I was gonna say next week I'm out, but this day and time works pretty well.
I am out that week after next.
Maybe first week in May.
That works for me. May
Works for
6th.
me.
Oh, you're proposing it, you said May 6th?
2 weeks, 3 weeks from the day, May 6th at noon works.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yep.
I just need to check my calendar. Sorry, one sec. 6. Oh, I'm actually out of the office for the second half of the day, but I could do 11 with a hard out at 12 on the 6th, unless you guys can do the 5th or the 7th.
I can do either.
I
Me
can
too.
do the 5th. Yeah, 5th at noon.
Okay, 5th at noon. Okay, I'll send out an invite.
Hey.
I mean, we don't have Mark's feedback if he's available, or Rep. Anderson, but maybe I could send an email to them first, making sure they're available. What do you think?
Are you guys also available on the 7th at noon?
Yep.
Okay, then
I
maybe
am.
let's let them pick from those.
Good idea. I will do that. Let me just open an email before I forget. Next. Subcommittee meeting. Okay, I will send it to them and hopefully they'll be available.
Okay, thank you.
See y'all Friday.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.